Hello, Tungsten Miner here. I'm standing in my industrial building looking at my oil refining setup. And I thought I would talk about how to process oil. There's actually quite a few mods that use the various byproducts of it, and there's a lot of different ways to refine the oil, and there's a lot of different things that come out of it. So I figured I'd talk about where do you find it, how do you collect it, and then what do you do with it once you've found it, and then a little bit about what you can do with the products. So to start off with, I'm going to head back to my crafting room and go put together a few things to take a trip out to find some oil. Here I am back in my crafting room, and I've just finished putting together all the things I'm going to take with me on my expedition. Normal bucket, a lily pad, some wood, and then a couple of things from various mods that I'll want to talk through in a little more detail. So first of all is the pump. This is the Buildcraft pump. So it's actually pretty easy to make. Tanks, which are just some glass, iron ingots, and iron gear, which is there's a couple of different recipes, but you can take a stone gear and wrap it in iron, or you can just substitute an iron ingot in the center, and that'll work too, at least in my mod pack. Depends on what you have installed. So that gets you your pump. The next thing is this portable tank. Now, a portable tank, we talked a little bit about before, is a tank that you can take with you. So unlike Buildcraft's tank, which when you break it loses all of its fluid, a portable tank from ThermalExpansion will keep its fluid when you break it. So you can drop it down, fill it full of some stuff, and then bring that stuff back with you. This is actually really, really important. If you do this with Buildcraft tanks, you'll be very unhappy. So the recipe for these guys is just take some glass, put a copper ingot in the middle. That gets you a portable tank, but that only can store 8 buckets worth of fluid. And that's going to be hardly worth your while. A typical oil spout is going to have hundreds of buckets of fluid, so you're going to want something bigger than that. So then you can take your portable tank and surround it with hardened glass, and that will get you a reinforced portable tank. Oh, no, right, sorry. You got to take your portable tank and you can surround it with Invar to get the mid-grade, and then surround it with hardened glass to get the next grade. So let's talk a little bit about Invar. Invar is one of the alloys that you can create that comes from Thermal Foundation, which is the core mod that ThermalDynamics and ThermalExpansion both require. The recipe, let's take a look over. Oh, they're going to make this difficult, aren't they? Here, let's look at this one then. The recipe to get some Invar blend, which you can then just smelt in order to get Invar, is 2 iron and 1 pulverized ferrous metal. So ferrous metal or nickel depends upon which mod you're getting it from. Ferrous metal is what Thermal Foundation calls it. Nickel is what Immersive Engineering calls it. Whichever way, doesn't matter. It's a 2-to-1 ratio. So you can either do this by grinding up the metal and then blending it like this, or you can just take the metal and throw it into your smeltery from Tinker's Construct and blend it that way. You can even take it and throw it into what is it called? This machine over here. The induction smelter, and just put 2 iron and 1 nickel, and that will produce your Invar over here. So whichever way you want to go about doing it, that gets you Invar, and then the recipe for hardened glass is to take 4 pulverized obsidian, which actually really, you get 4 of them by just pulverizing 1 block of obsidian. So really it's 1 block of obsidian and 1 block of lead, or 1 lead ingot. And you take these 2, throw them through your induction smelter, and you're going to get hardened glass. Both of these are things that a lot of the ThermalExpansion stuff, the solar arrays, Simply Jetpacks, and a lot of the other mods that are based on ThermalExpansion will use. So it's worthwhile to make like a whole stack of this stuff at a time, and you'll actually get through it and want to make another stack later on. So that gets us our tank. And then the last thing here is this hardened energy cell. What this does is it allows you to store RF and take it with you. And there's a whole bunch of different ones that different mods add. They all have some kind of capacitor. But this happens to be the one from ThermalExpansion. It stores 2 million RF and is fairly easy to make. you make yourself a leadstone energy cell by just taking lead, glass, and redstone, adding some copper and a conductance coil, which is just electrum with redstone, and that gets you the leadstone energy cell, and then you surround that with Invar to upgrade it to a hardened energy cell. There's actually a couple of other grades above this that get even more complicated to make, but pumps actually don't require a whole lot of power, so this one is just fine. Okay, and so for my basic expedition, this is really all the stuff I need. What I'm going to do now is get together, I've got all my other things that I need, so a sleeping bag and some food, my charged porter to get back home again, pickaxe and cleaver, armor, all the normal things you'll need when you're venturing out into the world. And I'm going to go off and see if I can't find some kind of oil well. Now, there's two different ways that this mod pack introduces oil to the game. The first is through BuildCraft. And all Buildcraft oil is going to take the form of spouts that stick up way above the ground and very frequently will often happen out in the ocean. And so you'll be able to spot them from a long ways off and be very easy to find. The other way that this mod pack adds oil is through Galacticraft. But Galacticraft oil appears in pools deep underground, so it's a lot harder to find the stuff. So I'm going to go off and see if I can't find a Buildcraft oil spout somewhere out in the world, and talk to you when I find it. Here I am. I've gone a little ways away from home, and I'm out in the ocean a bit, and I have found an oil spout. So this is obviously a Buildcraft oil spout out here in the ocean, and if I turn on my night vision, we can see that it goes actually right into the ground. So the shape of these things is not just what you see up here, but it's going to go down underground a ways and then have a big spherical ball of oil underground. So now what we need to do is to capture some of this and bring it back home with us. Since this is out in the middle of the ocean, and I kind of expected that's what I would find, I brought along a lily pad so that I can start building on the surface of the water here. So I'm going to turn and try to get just the edge of that lily pad. There we go, that's a little bit easier. So now I've got that, I've got that. I'm going to drop this down here and drop that down there, and that over there, which pops off my lily pad. So I'm going to finish building this little oil platform and then be right back with you. Okay, here I am. I've got my oil platform built, and really all I've done is starting from that one lily pad, I've built up a little floating platform which actually goes all the way down to the bottom. Doesn't need to, but I like to keep things realistic, and then has a little bit of a tower so that I'm just above the top of the oil spout, and that block is waiting to be filled in. That's the one immediately above my oil spout. And that's where the rest of this stuff comes in. So first, I'm going to take my pump and very carefully put it just at the end of my oil derrick, immediately above that middle block of the oil spout. And right away, what's going to happen is nothing, because I haven't provided any power. So the next thing I'm going to do is to put some power there. I'm going to come up here and drop some power there. And I need to program this thing a little bit, because right now it's having power come out one side there, which is not, I don't think the side I really want. So I'm going to say power out pretty much on all these sides. There's no reason not to, because I kind of want to use the power. And now what I should see is the pump kicking into action. So the pump will extend down this little tube that's going to reach the topmost liquid block and suck it up. And then it's going to reach around all the other blocks that are at the same Y level and suck up all of those too. Now, of course, this is a spout that's just got one block sticking up, 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 and the rest of it is actually just flowing oil blocks, which don't count. So it's picking up block by block by block, and it's filling up its internal reservoir, which is actually quite small. So now we're going to take our pump and drop it just on top. And immediately we can see the bottom of it is filled black with oil. And as we let our pump run, it's going to get more and more filled up with oil. And every time it drills down, it's going to turn green as it's pumping and spit out a little bit of oil into our tank. And we can watch that it's picking up those blocks. Now, one of the problems that we might run into is we've got some oil in the midst of all of this liquid all around us. So we don't want to pump out the entire ocean. And that's why I'm using the Buildcraft Pump. A long while back when the mod first started, it wouldn't distinguish between oil and water, and you'd have all sorts of problems. But it's been a while, and the BuildCraft guys have fixed this up so that it can distinguish between various kinds of fluids, and it won't pump anything that it hasn't already gotten started on. So if it gets started on oil, it will continue on oil, and only oil, and will never pick up water. And in fact, as you can see, it's filling in, or at least it's allowing the water blocks to fill in as it goes behind, because of course 2 water blocks with a space in between in Minecraft will generate a new water block in the middle. So on and on this thing is going to go, and it's going to keep pumping up the oil until it's managed to fill both its internal reservoir and the tank that we've got on top of it there. So I'm going to hang out here for a little while until the tank gets pretty well filled up, and then be right back with you. Okay, it's been about a Minecraft day or so, maybe half a Minecraft day. And we've got a decent amount of oil in there. So I'm going to use my waypoint system in Journey Maps to make a new waypoint to remember where this oil well is. And that way I can come back and find my gear again later on. But for now, I'm just going to grab this tank, which now has 36 buckets of oil, and I'm going to let this alone. If I really wanted to, I could add a chunk loader, which is a device that keeps a part of your Minecraft world running even when you're not around, so that this thing could keep going. So I could leave the tank here, I could leave a chunk loader here, and it would fill the tank right up while I'm not around. I could just come swap out the tanks and bring it back to my home with me. But I don't need to do that right now, and hanging around for a bit wasn't too bad. So I'm going to fly back home, and I'll see you back in my industrial room. Okay, here we are back in my industrial room, and let's talk about how I'm going to refine this crude oil here. Like I said, a lot of different mods use oil for a variety of things, and there's, not surprisingly, a lot of different mods that add oil and add oil refining to the game. So if we take a look here in NEI, and look for refineries, there are 3 ones in the mod pack that I'm using. One for Buildcraft, one from Galacticraft, and one from PneumaticCraft. The Buildcraft Refinery is 4 diamonds, 4 gold ingots, 4 iron ingots, some stone, sticks, and then a bunch of glass to make the tanks. So actually not that expensive and not that complicated to build. The thing is that it requires a decent amount of power, a fair bit of power actually, and it's not too fast. None of the methods are fast, and it only produces Buildcraft fuel. So I don't get these 4 different fractions that I get using the PneumaticCraft refinery. And I kind of do want them. They're actually useful for a variety of things. So that's why I don't go with the Buildcraft refinery. Although in other mod packs where I don't have PneumaticCraft, that is definitely my first choice. The second refinery is from Galacticraft. I've never actually used this one, so I'm just going to actually skip right over that one. And then finally, there's the refinery from PneumaticCraft. Now, this is pretty straightforward to make. Compressed iron, well, that's not too easy to make, but it's actually not that hard either. I'll talk about that in a future video when I go through PneumaticCraft. Suffice to say, it's not hard to get your hands on this stuff in massive quantities. And then, of course, glass and diamond, easy to come by. So the thing is, though, when you make one of these things, it's not good enough to actually refine anything. You need at least 2 of them, and up to 4. And what happens is you stack them on top of each other like this guy here, and it provides different recipes based upon whether you've got 2 or 4 of them. So if you've only got 2, it'll take the oil and convert 4 of it into diesel and 2 of it into LPG. Notice no Buildcraft fuel. So if you wanted the Buildcraft fuel, say for Galacticraft, you need to keep going and build yourself another one. If you do that, you get diesel, kerosene, and LPG. Still no fuel. So you actually have to build 4 of them if you want to get that gasoline or Buildcraft fuel. It's the same stuff. Fraction of the oil burnt off, which is why, of course, I went ahead and did that. Now, it is possible to upgrade various fractions. So I can take this diesel, run it through a machine, in fact, that machine right there, and convert it into kerosene. I can take the kerosene, convert it into fuel, and that up to LPG. So even if you build the less complicated refineries, you'll still be able to get by if you build these other machines. But you will notice too, I've got all these red blocks underneath, and they're in fact compressed iron. They're just 9 ingots of compressed iron into a block, just like regular iron. And underneath, I've got a 3x3 section of netherrack, which I've lit on fire, and then the heat from the fire converts this, or heats up the iron, and then the iron being hot transmits its heat to the refinery, and the refinery's temperature internally goes up. So PneumaticCraft adds this whole idea of blocks having a temperature. Now, I've also added heat to the system by using this vortex tube, which is a block from PneumaticCraft that, if provided with air pressure in the form of these tubes, and I'll talk about how that all got set up and where I'm getting the air pressure from in a future video. Suffice to say, though, if you provide air pressure, it can then split the air into a hot portion and a cool portion. And so, obviously, my hot portion is the red, and the cool portion is the blue. And now I'm adding even more heat to this refinery. So the refinery requires a temperature for all of its recipes of 100 degrees Celsius. And right now I've got a temperature of 166 degrees Celsius. So it'll actually process the oil even faster than at the minimal rate. And making it hotter just makes it go faster. It doesn't change the quantities or the arrangement of what you wind up getting. The next thing is, let's take our oil and we'll drop it on this hardened fluid duct. And then we remember from talking about portable tanks before, right now it's in collection mode. And so I'm just going to hit it with a wrench and turn it into pouring mode. So that's going to go into this hardened fluid duct. Hardened fluid duct is from ThermalDynamics. And fluid duct, here we go. Hardened fluid duct. And it's just Invar and hardened glass of some kind. And you'll get 6 of these guys. And we talked a lot about how to make all that stuff. So these are handy because you can do a lot more flexible things with them in smaller spaces than you can with Buildcraft pipes. So when I know I've got a lot of things to do that's either complicated or constrained in space, I'll use fluid ducts instead of Buildcraft pipes. In this case, though, we're just dumping the fuel or the oil into the refinery, and it's filled up the internal reservoir. And since we've got enough heat, it's going to start processing the oil into its various components. Now you notice the heat has gone down quite a bit. It was over 160 degrees centigrade before, and now it's down to 120-ish. So some of the heat gets used every time a little bit of oil gets converted. And so you're going to have to achieve a balance of providing enough heat into the system to keep it hot enough to stay above that threshold. And as you process oil, it's going to use up some of that heat. And you'll have to be continuously providing more. You can see these blocks have gotten less red, and that's gotten less red. Over here, I'm using servos, just like I did over with the reactor, to draw the fluid out of my refinery. And the way that these pipes work, only one fluid can be drawn out at a time. And this top one is collecting LPG, this one's collecting fuel, kerosene, and diesel. And so each of these servos is just pulling out whatever it can and dropping it into the pipe system. The pipe system then comes around to these 4 tanks, each of which have a filter leading into them. So this filter says only LPG, because it's a white list, not a black list. So only this is allowed. Only fuel is allowed here. Only kerosene is allowed here. And that provides me with my fuel in various grades in all of these different tanks. So that's all I'm going to cover for this time, but I will carry on next time with a couple of different ways in which I wind up using these various byproducts in the game. So if you like the video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you want to see more like this, hit subscribe. And otherwise, talk to you later.